All right. I'm Peter Alessandria, and for the next 90 minutes, I invite you to be much bigger than you think you are. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Let's jump in with some announcements. All right, so we're going to start with our announcements for tonight. Then we have a recommended reading, and tonight it's actually a recommended listening. I'll explain more about that in a minute. All right, we have our affirmation of the day. After that, we'll have an opportunity for people to introduce themselves if they're new or anybody who wants to share a victory from the last week. We'll listen to an excerpt from the audiobook, Be Bigger Than You Think You Are, my favorite book. We'll have our topic discussion. We'll take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back for the assignment and questions and answers, and we'll wrap it up by 9:30. So our first announcement, as usual, we have author-signed paperbacks of Be Bigger Than You Think You Are available on the website. There's a 20% discount by using the coupon code BOOK20 at checkout at bebiggertoday.com/book. I'm happy to sign the copy of the book to whoever you want me to. They make great holiday gifts, and check them out. Also, my book, New York Cityscapes, my photography book, New York City Photography, is available as well. This is a collaboration with 6 other photographers, New York City area photographers, and it is the definitive New York City photo book. It's all things New York. So for the New York City lover in you, this would make a great holiday gift. For the New York City lover in your life, this would make the great holiday gift. So here are some of my original photos. I have all kinds of different, and the cool thing about this book is that all 7 of us, all 7 photographers, have a different take on the New York City skyline, on the New York City landmarks and all of that. So it's really cool to see the exact same locations, the exact same landmarks, and we all photograph them differently. So it's available for $16.95 on the website, bebiggertoday.com/bookstore, and I'll sign that for you as well. The audiobook still available for pre-order. I'm inching my way closer and closer to having it finished. It's $9.99. It's almost half off the regular price. It's 9.5 hours, completely unabridged, and both the audiobook and the paperback have a money-back guarantee, so if you don't love it, just let me know and I'll send you your money back, but I know you're going to love it. Check it out at bebiggertoday.com/bookstore. And also, to complete your holiday gift giving, you can do all your shopping in one place at bebiggertoday.com. We have merch for you, hats and t-shirts. Use the code MERCH20 at checkout to save 20%. And finally, New York City refrigerator magnets, my original photos. There's a whole story behind these magnets, by the way. And actually, if you've read the book, it's in chapter 7 where I talk about how these magnets actually came to being. It's a whole story. These magnets represent forgiveness, and I'll talk more about it when we get to chapter 7. So if you need refrigerator magnets for holiday gifts, stocking stuffers, check it out at bebiggertoday.com/merch. And finally, I am available for one-on-one coaching. If you're an artist, if you're a photographer, if you're a writer, a creative person, or even if you're not, and you just want to be bigger than you think you are, get in touch with me. We'll set up a coaching program for you. I also will come in and talk to your company, or if you work for a company, you'll come in and talk to your management team, your sales team, and help all them be bigger than they think they are as well. Reach out to me through the website. We'll set that up. All right, so we're going to start off with our recommended reading for tonight. Now, as I said, it's not actually reading, it's recommended listening. Now, there's a gentleman named Brian Scott. I actually just found Brian's YouTube channel, gosh, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's just amazing. I'm not sure what he is exactly, but he reads and records a lot of literature, a lot of spiritual, metaphysical, new age, new thought literature. And a lot of it is early, like turn of the century stuff, like the original new thought people. And it's just amazing. And he actually reads all these different books and all these different pieces of literature, and he actually plays music in the background, and it's beautifully produced. And it's really, there's one particular author that I'm going to talk about in a few weeks that I found through Brian's YouTube channel that has just completely rocked my world. And this was something that was first written in the 1920s, I think. So anyway, check out Brian Scott on YouTube. Great collection of literature. He's very prolific. He puts a lot of stuff out. He also has a book called The Reality Revolution. I have not read that book yet, but you can check that out as well. It kind of, from what I can tell, it's a compilation of all the different spiritual, metaphysical things that he's been studying and working on for years. So if nothing else, check out his website. All his stuff is available for free on the website, on YouTube, and then maybe you'll like the book as well. All right, today's affirmation. There is nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with any of us. Now, why is this important? Well, if you were raised in a house like I was, where I heard all the time, what's wrong with you? How many times do I have to tell you? By a very well-intentioned, very loving, very doing the best they could parent. But nonetheless, hearing that day after day after day, you know, kids are literal. And when you tell a 4-year-old, what's wrong with you? How many times do I have to tell you? That becomes the messaging that kind of gets imprinted. And at least for me, I can only speak for myself, I walked around for most of my life thinking there was something wrong with me. There was something about me that was not okay. And that plays out in a lot of different ways. In particular, this core belief that I have about myself that I'm unlovable. I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough, don't have what it takes. And this goes along hand in hand with that, this idea that there's something wrong with me. So a great affirmation, something I say every morning to myself, often in the mirror, with a big smile on my face, by the way, is there's nothing wrong with you. So this is our affirmation for today. I offer that to you guys. And so now let's take an opportunity for people to introduce themselves or share any victories that you have. So if you're new and would like to say hi, you can unmute yourself. Or if you have a victory that you want to share from the last week, you can unmute yourself as well. This is a great time to let us know what's going on. Anybody want to say hi or share a victory, introduce themselves?
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Linda. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Peter's a friend of mine from my photography forum and fellow author. So, I don't know. Hello, everybody.
Welcome, Linda. So glad you're here. So glad you're able to make it. Linda has been kind of coaching me, inspiring me behind the scenes on how to get the book out there. So I appreciate all your love and support, Linda, and I'm so glad that you're here with us tonight.
Glad it's working. I saw you got a success there with Harrow. So
got it. Thank you. Anybody else want to say hi, share a victory, or introduce themselves if you're new?
Peter, I do. It's Judy.
Hello, Judy.
Hi there, everybody. I've just been coming because a friend told me about it, who's on. And I've got a few victories this week. All right, this is cool. Number one is I did an interview for a podcast. I've never done that before alone. I've done it with my son, who's in the same field as I am, which is food addiction, sugar addiction. But this was somebody that actually contacted me and asked me to do one. And it came out today, and I listened to it on top of it. And it's not bad. It's not bad. I had a lot of ands and ums in the beginning, but once I got into it, I could see myself relaxing and hear the difference, you know, by the end. It was a 45-minute interview. So that was cool. That's a big deal. And then another victory is that my son runs a free support group, and he was out of town this past week. And he asked me if I would run it for him. And he said, oh, I could ask so-and-so, but I thought it would be good experience. And I said, sure, without any hesitation. You have no idea the fear I'm walking through. But I did it, and he said to me, oh, so you have about 20 people? I said, no, there were 29 people. So it was a success. But the point is I've been able to, it's not angsting me, and it's not causing me anxiety or feeling angst. And that's a miracle. That is a miracle. And so it's amazing what you can read or hear, like from last week, you know, what you were talking about. and how you can really put it in your life and make it work. So I just wanted to share that. So there was a few victories. So it was exciting.
All right. Well, that's awesome, Judy. I only have one thing to say. Woohoo!
Yeah.
Good for
3
you.
times though, Peter.
Oh,
Come on, 2 more times.
Woohoo!
All right.
That's great. Anybody else want to check in or just say hi?
Oops, I do. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Dee.
Hey, Peter. Hey, everybody. So it's a victory. Every time I get to be live with you all in Peter's workshop, it feels like a huge victory. So thank you very much. I'm walking through, I'm doing something really difficult. So this particular remembering these trainings, this heavy lifting that Peter's done for us, and re-listening to all of the recordings. The most recent one was August 26th, so I'm doing it slowly. It's just so helpful. And I shared the book with my boss today. My former boss, my client passed away, but we traded books, and I'm just so thrilled to have this right now in my life when is so I can, someday I'll be able to share the details of how important it is to me, but I can just tell you it's foundational, it's divine, it is life-saving and life-affirming, and so I'm so grateful. Thank you. I'm gonna leave it at that for now.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Dee. So glad that you're here. And you're on the West Coast, so I keep forgetting you're 3 hours. It's like still daytime out there. Great. Thank you for checking in. Anybody else want to say hi or check in?
I'll say hi. It's Jan in California, and I just wanted to say that one of my successes this week, as I reread your chapter 1, and I got together with a study buddy and answered some of the questions. So
Awesome.
I found them to be insightful and helpful, and we're going to try to get together weekly and read a chapter and do our questions.
Awesome. That's so awesome. That was my intention when I wrote the book. It's for me. Thank you, Jan.
Welcome.
Anything else?
Nope. Just good to see you. And I love the Halloween.
Yeah, it's fall, so we have the leaves changing and everything here. All right, that's great. So if you don't know, this is written as a workbook. So at the end of each chapter, there are exercises. And I say to people, look, it's one thing to read a book. It's another thing to actually do the work. It goes from a passive experience to an active learning experience. And being here, doing the work here with us. So that's great. And I love that you're partnering with people. That's another vision of mine, another dream of mine, for people to connect outside of the workshops and work on the material together, and then bring back what you find, and share it with us. And it's a learning experience for me because this was, as I say, this was written in a vacuum. I mean, I had 6 months where I had very limited contact with the outside world, and this book came through me. And I had an idea that, it might be helpful for people, but I love to see it in action when people are actually using it to make changes in their life. So thank you. Really appreciate that. Anybody else?
I can. It's
Cynthia.
It says Cindy, but it's Cynthia. I had a victory this week. Thank you. I finally requested help with regard to getting some specifics about several things that are legal matters that I've sort of reached out and gotten some information from you and others. And now I got some more information, and I'm feeling more confident about going forward with actually doing the work that's involved. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And woohoo! So this is being bigger than you think you are. This is moving into, when you start a business, there are legalities involved. There are all kinds of considerations. And I know for me, at least, even being a lawyer at one point in my life, it can still be difficult to navigate all that and to move through that. So I acknowledge you, Cynthia. And that's great. Keep us posted on your progress. Thank you. Anybody else?
No victories, but, I think, since we've been going through this, and I think, every day at work, I go, I can do this, I can do this. So now I have a new affirmation, it's a little bit longer, but easier. And I think you'd like it. It says, we grow. We grow through a multitude of small choices every day and every way.
Beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, so I love it too. And that's what it is. But it's like you said, it's hard work. It's all day long, constantly talking to yourself, saying, you could do this, you could do this. Now I have to say, I can do this, and I can grow through multitudes of, all my choices every minute, every hour, I guess every day. And that's what we can do until we feel better.
Good.
So hi.
That's great.
Okay, thanks.
And what I hear is, it's taking responsibility for what you're saying to yourself, for what you're thinking, because we're talking to ourselves all day long. It's just usually we're talking to ourselves in a negative, in a negative manner, as opposed to now saying, wait a second, I have a choice. And then I love what you said about choices, because I use the analogy in the book. A painter, she picks her canvas, she picks her paints, she picks her brushes, and then she makes choices where she's going to place the paint on that canvas. And it's stroke, but each stroke is another choice. All right. And choice upon choice, decision upon decision. And then eventually you have a completed painting. And that's exactly what we do with our life. Every choice, every decision we make is another brushstroke in the painting of our lives. And so now where the invitation is, and the point of where I'm coming from, and I know there's a lot of other people out there talking about this stuff, do you want to do it consciously or unconsciously? Do you want to do it the way you've been doing it for the last years, or you want to do it in a more deliberate, conscious way? Hopefully from a place of love and forgiveness, because the other thing is, we beat ourselves up thinking that's going to help us make better choices and decisions. And the truth is it doesn't. Beating ourselves up never makes us better people. So you're doing great, Barb. I keep saying that, but trust me, you are. And I love it. It's all, for me at least, it's all about, this is, so, I'm not going to go there. It's all about being conscious and present in the moment and being aware of what am I thinking, what am I feeling, what am I saying, what am I doing, and are those things in alignment with who I want to be in my life?
Right. And so when I saw this, I forget where I saw it written down. It just talked to me. It just grabbed me. It's small, it's simple, but it's something that, I need to say all day long instead of the negative stuff. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. Great. Anybody else? All right, then we're going to jump into one of my favorite topics. We're starting chapter 4. If you have the book, the title of chapter 4 is From F-E-A-R to L-O-V-E. All right, so we're going to start, let's see. We're going to start tonight. We're going to spend a few weeks on this chapter. We're going to really take the ride. We're going to go from fear to love. And, it turns out, again, if you've read A Course in Miracles, it's in a lot of places. The Course says we only have two emotions, either love or fear. And it's very interesting. It defines fear as the absence of love. And I give an example in the book. I'll talk about it probably next week or the week after, where by changing how I was treating myself, by bringing love to myself in a particular situation, I was able to remove the fear. And fear is like resistance. Fear keeps us from taking action. Fear keeps us small and frightened and paralyzed. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So we're going on this journey now, and what we want to do is we want to move from the fear to the love. And it turns out, for me at least, it's a lot easier than I thought it would be once I bring some conscious intention to it and some understanding. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with the audiobook. We're going to listen to an excerpt from chapter 4. If you have the book, it's right at the beginning of the chapter, page 99, if you want to read along. It's about a 7-minute excerpt, and then we'll come back and talk more about this topic. So hang on for this. Chapter 4, From Fear to Love. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Franklin D. Roosevelt. As the above quote from FDR reminds us, there's only one thing that stands between us and everything we want in life: fear. Fear can derail a career, end a relationship, or even terminate someone's life. As we'll see in this chapter, fear is not caused by something outside of us. Instead, like all feelings, it's the result of who we think we are. This means all it takes to alleviate our anxieties, worries, and concerns is a new idea about ourselves. Of course, once again, this falls under the heading of simple but not easy. Yet, until we understand the real source of the problem, it will be difficult, if not impossible, for us to change. There are a couple of popular acronyms associated with FEAR. One is false evidence appearing real. The other is F everything and run. Cute, right? While both are worth thinking about, let me give you my own definition of fear. Fear is an emotional response to a perception of ourselves as powerless and/or unlovable in a given situation. How's that for a mouthful? Let's break it down. An emotional response. You've probably heard it said that emotion equals energy in motion. Think about when you feel good emotionally. Do you have more energy? Is it easier to get stuff done? Compare that to when you're not feeling so good emotionally. Lower energy, tougher to get moving. Thus, it can be said that there's a direct correlation between our emotional and physical states. Since it takes energy to accomplish things in life, it's good to know that our energy levels are affected by how we're feeling emotionally. We can improve our physical state by changing our thinking and thus our feelings. Generally speaking, fear is a paralyzing emotion. When we're gripped by worry, anxiety, dread, etc., it can be very difficult to take action or get things done. The physiological effects of fear in the body mimic the emotional ones. We hold our breath, tense our muscles, our stomach tightens, and we move more slowly. There's a general contraction in the body, occasionally accompanied by a marshaling of energy in anticipation of having to run, hide, or fight. Footnote 17. While fear is behind the fight or flight response, with those few exceptions where a burst of energy is needed to survive, fear mostly shuts us down. Back to the text. From an evolutionary perspective, this response is quite adaptive. When an animal is in danger, being prepared in this way can save that animal's life. But what may have served us in our ancestral past probably has less value today. While there are certainly potential pitfalls associated with life in the modern world, it's unlikely we'll be confronted with the same or even similar dangers that our forebears faced. Thus, true fight or flight situations, at least as measured by what primitive man had to deal with, are quite rare these days. Yet the limbic brain in modern humans remains as vigilant as ever. It's constantly on the lookout for danger. Except instead of scanning the plains of the Serengeti, it scans our home, work, and social environments. And instead of finding woolly mammoths or saber-toothed tigers, we're set on edge by an encounter with our boss, mother-in-law, or the IRS. When I was a young attorney and a senior partner walked into my office unexpectedly, he or she may as well have been a saber-toothed tiger or woolly mammoth. No offense to any of the senior partners at the firms I worked for. Obviously, in the appropriate situation, the fight or flight response can be a lifesaver. But most of us enter fight or flight mode without ever being in real physical danger. This results in the response being way overutilized. False positives release stress hormones into our bodies, which, over the long term, can damage our tissues, organs, and immune system. Fear versus caution. For this and other reasons, I like to remind people there's a difference between fear and caution. Caution means a common-sense approach to life. We take reasonable precautions based on an objective assessment of the situation. Caution says look both ways before crossing the street, get all the information before making that investment, wear a safety belt when driving, and so on. It's a rational response to the vicissitudes of life and represents a reasonable and proportional attempt to mitigate risk. Fear, on the other hand, is generally neither rational nor proportional. Whether paralyzing or adrenalizing, fear is often an intense reaction that has the potential to do more harm than good. Fear can take many forms, including anxiety, terror, panic, worry, concern, foreboding, dread, and so on. We can spend a lifetime, metaphorically speaking at least, hiding under the bed in one or more areas of our lives because of some irrational form of fear. Footnote 18. Developmental psychologists tell us children are born with only two fears: fear of falling and fear of loud noises. These reactions make sense from an evolutionary standpoint. But what's important is that this means all our other fears are learned, i.e., they are not natural. Fear of criticism, fear of rejection, fear of shame or humiliation, even the fear of death are all learned responses. The good news is this means they can be unlearned. Back to the text. Back to my definition of fear. To a perception of ourselves. As we've been discussing throughout this book, a perception of ourselves is who we think we are. It's the mostly made up, mostly negative self-image that many of us carry from childhood. It results from the story we tell ourselves about our past experiences. The good news is any perception is just a way of seeing something. This means it can be changed. As we've already said, our goal is to move from who we think we are to who we want to be. This is accomplished by consciously and deliberately choosing thoughts, feelings, words, and actions that are in alignment with our new idea about ourselves. The more we do this, the more our perception of who we are changes. As powerless and/or unlovable. Like all emotional reactions, fear is a result of passing an external event through our internal filter of who we think we are, and then assigning a meaning to that event. Thus, as the following explanation makes clear, if we're reacting with fear, we're likely seeing ourselves as either powerless and/or unlovable. Powerless means who we think we are is helpless. We see ourselves, often unconsciously, as unable to take care of ourselves or to get what we think we want or need. The specific feelings of fear arise when we think we are in danger or will be hurt by someone or something over which we have no control. The result we think we'll suffer is we'll experience pain, injury, or loss. The meaning we give the situation is that we can't protect or defend ourselves from these things. Unlovable literally means we're not able to be loved. We believe there is something about us that is inherently not okay. We may see ourselves as bad, unworthy, guilty, unattractive, and so on. In this case, the fear arises from the idea that we will be met with punishment, rejection, humiliation, loneliness, etc. for being who we are. We're certain we'll feel bad or hurt as a result, and are equally certain there's little or nothing we can do to avoid feeling this way. In a given situation, fear is mostly situational. Yes, we may experience an overall sense of dread or foreboding in our lives, but acute feelings of fear usually arise in relation to specific people and/or circumstances. As you already know, the problem is never the situation, but always and only how we see ourselves in that situation. Thus, our normal response of trying to change the external circumstances when we're afraid won't be of much help. We may get some temporary relief, but eventually the fear will resurface elsewhere because we haven't addressed the root cause of it, i.e., who we think we are in that or similar situations. All right. So, the first and most important point, which you heard in the excerpt there, is something that I've been saying from the beginning, and that is the situation is never the problem. The problem is always and only how we see ourselves in that situation. And our reactions are based on our perception of ourselves. Our reactions are based on who we think we are in that situation. Now, it turns out this is really good news because we often can't change the external situations. We can't change the external circumstances. We certainly can't change other people, but we can always change how we see ourselves. All right, so now just to circle back a little bit, so the acronym, I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but it's worth looking at again. The acronym for FEAR is false evidence appearing real, or F everything and run. Now, it turns out that first definition, that first acronym is actually pretty accurate. And I come to the conclusion, I'll give you a little foreshadow of the end of the chapter, I come to the conclusion that one of the most important things we can say about fear is that it's not real. It is truly false evidence that appears real in our consciousness and our awareness. But again, it's based always and only on who we think we are, how we see ourselves in that situation. So all my anxieties, all my fears, all my worries, all my concerns, it's not a function of what's happening outside of me. Now, we're not going to throw common sense to the wind. In a moment, we're going to talk about the difference between fear and caution. But all those, my assessment and my reaction and the meaning I give a situation is always based on who I think I am. And as I work to change that, I can tell you from my own life, this is my own experience. As I change how I see myself, in fact, I'm going to talk about an experience I had this afternoon in a minute. As I change how I see myself, my fear goes down. You know, the more I see myself as capable, as being able to take care of myself and all of that, I'm less anxious, I'm less afraid. All right, now I still pay attention, I still do what I need to do to take care of myself, but I do it from a different place. And that's a really important distinction. All right, so false evidence appearing real, or my favorite, F everything and run. All right, so now, as you heard in the audiobook a moment ago, I've come up with my own definition of fear. And, you know, this is my truth. I've shared it with some other people. Apparently other people relate to it. Perhaps your definition is a little different. But for me, fear is an emotional response to perception of ourselves as powerless and or unlovable in a given situation. All right, now again, as you heard in the excerpt from the audiobook, we can break this down. So the first thing to look at is an emotional response. And again, I'm sure you've heard it before, emotion equals energy in motion. I talk about how fear is a paralyzing emotion. It shuts us down. Fear is a form of resistance. I always say for me, procrastination is not about being lazy. Being lazy is usually not about being lazy. Procrastination is a 5-syllable word for fear. It shuts us down. It becomes difficult to take action. It becomes difficult to do what we need to do in our lives. Much less, you know, show up on a regular basis, much less go out and build a business, build a career, write a book, you know, whatever it is that we want to do. So there's this idea that, and you know, when I started doing, as I've done some research over the years and just looked at my own life, you know, fear has an evolutionary value for us as a species. You know, if you think back to the time of primitive man, you know, there's some people who say we're descendants from apes. I don't know if we're ascended from apes. Others say we were these little tree-dwelling mammals, you know, that were closer to lemurs or these other, you know, monkeys or whatever. Whatever you think we were, that we descended from, it was really important for those guys to be on alert, for those guys to be aware, for those guys to be ready to take off at a moment's notice, fight or flight. Because every time they left wherever they lived, if they lived in a cave or in a tree or wherever they were taking their life, their life was at risk. They were taking a chance with their very existence. So those guys needed to be ready to fight, ready to hide, ready to flee, whatever it was to survive. So fear was about, you know, in an evolutionary sense, it was about preserving the species. You know, if you went out even as a, you know, caveman, you know, Neanderthal, I mean, those guys, you know, you walk out of your cave and you're not paying attention, you're going to get pounced on by some creature or whatever. You know, you got to be alert to those things. The problem is our limbic brain, the part of the mind, a part of the brain that is responsible for emotions, is still kind of stuck in the caveman era. And you know, we have this hypervigilance. And again, as I said in the audiobook, you know, instead of scanning the plains of the Serengeti or the forest or the jungle, you know, we scan our work environments, our home environments, you know, our social environments, and we're on the lookout for what's going to pounce on us next. And again, I talk about in the book, you know, when a senior partner, when I was a practicing lawyer and I worked at a big law firm, when one of those senior partners walked into my office, they may as well have been a woolly mammoth or a saber-toothed tiger. I mean, I just had this visceral response of wanting to hide or fight, you know, or whatever. So we're projecting, we're taking that energy and we're putting it on our modern life. And, the current situation with the virus and everything else notwithstanding, life has never been safer for us as a species. We can argue about that and all, but let's just say on a day-to-day basis, when I go out to look for food at ShopRite, I'm not putting, hopefully I'm not putting my life at risk. Whereas, when those little apes or whatever they were, when they went out in the world, they really had to be aware and they had to be ready at a moment's notice to fight or flee, fight or flight. So for me at least, now I can say, looking back on my life, that constant hypervigilance and that constant fight or flight response, it actually disrupted my body's hormonal system. And I ended up with adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, and it was all from, being in this constant state of hypervigilance, never being able to relax, always ready to either fight, defend myself, or hide out from life. And, that the adrenaline, the cortisol, it affects your physiology, it affects the body. And so even just at a physical level, at a physiological level, it creates all kinds of problems. And then at the psychological level, at the social level, in our relationships with other people, I couldn't really do my best work for a client or for, a partner at a law firm if I'm looking at them as the enemy, if I'm looking at them as a threat in my environment that I have to protect myself from. I'm not able to do my best work. I'm not able to be creative. I'm not able to have intimacy in my personal relationships. If I'm afraid that they're going to leave me or they're going to judge me or criticize me or they're not going to like me, if I spend my days in that place of fear, there's no room for true intimacy in that relationship, let alone any fun, any joy. So, so beginning to recognize that we have this legacy, this thing that we carry from our ancestral past that did serve us at one time. But for me at least, and I know other people, people may have a different opinion on all this, especially the way things are going right now. But I will say that in my mind at least, I have to find another way to deal with my life, and the fight or flight response, the hypervigilance, the just living in that place of fear creates more problems than it solves for me. Now, coming back to our definition, the next part of the definition is a perception of ourselves. Now, this is just a fancy way of saying, who do you think you are? How do you see yourself? So my perception of myself is how I see myself, who I think I am. And you see at the end of the definition, in a given situation. Like all emotional reactions, fear is situational. All right, we may have an overall sense of foreboding or dread, but those true feelings of fear in the moment, it's usually in relation to a particular person or a particular situation. Which is actually good news, because we can look at, again, the problem is never the situation. The problem is how I see myself in that situation. Now, the middle part of this definition, a perception of ourselves as powerless and or unlovable. Now, I go into more detail in the book about, this idea of powerlessness. For me, that's, again, it's just a way of saying I see myself as helpless. I see myself as not being able to take care of myself. I'm not going to get what I think I want or need in that situation. I'm not going to be able to stand up for myself. I'm not going to be able to deal with this person or this situation. And that's a perception of myself as powerless. Now, the thing that happened this afternoon that I want to share with you guys really briefly, because we're already at the break time, is, as you guys know, I've worked as a photographer for almost 15 years, actually 12 years. And finally, after the COVID thing, my business is finally coming back, and I had an old client get in touch with me to do some photography for him. And he has been, I haven't seen him in about 2 years, 2.5 years, but I did a bunch of work for him. And he is, for me, a challenging personality. He reminds me of people in my past, and I noticed and he has certain personality traits and characteristics that trigger me. And so when I started working with him a few years ago, I was picked up on it pretty quickly, which is really good news. It's like going in, I was like, oh, okay, so I haven't even met this person yet, but I'm feeling these feelings, I'm having these thoughts, I'm having these reactions. I know it's about me, it's not about him. Let me look at who does he remind me of in my life, or what's common about this situation. Anyway, he got in touch with me a couple of weeks ago, and he wanted me to do some photography for him. I'm not going to get into the specifics, but it's product photography, and he has a very high-end product that he sells. And he's very particular about his photos. Very, very particular. And so he actually came over to my place last week. We did a bunch, and then I had a bunch more to do. And I sent him all the photos yesterday. And I got an email from him this morning, and it was, thanks for the photos. When can we speak? When can we talk on the phone? It wasn't great job, I love it. It was when can we speak? So I know him a little bit, and I know he has a critical side to him. And so some of those feelings came up, like I'm not going to be okay. Because one thing I do, especially with clients and girlfriends, is I give my power away. I make what they think of me more important than what I think of myself. So all these little light bulbs go off in my head, and so I emailed him back. I told him what time I could speak and what time I would call him. And then I did what we've been talking about, all right? I did a little advance intention. I took a little time ahead of time to think through the conversation I was going to have with him. What was I going to say? How was I going to react? And most importantly, who did I want to be in that situation? How did I want to see myself in that phone conversation with him? And the biggest thing for me was to remind myself, I'm not that 6-year-old kid anymore. I'm not a little kid. I know how to take care of myself in my relationships with other people. I know how to set boundaries. I know how to let other people's criticism, I know how to let information that's helpful in and keep out the hurtful comments, the hurtful part of it. I don't have to take things personally anymore. So it was, I haven't worked at all in almost 7 months, and I haven't worked with him in a few years, but it was a good reminder of that. So when I had the actual phone conversation with him, sure enough, he was very particular about some things, and I can't say he was unhappy, but it was clear to me that he would have liked to have seen the work done differently. But within a few minutes, I was aware, I was conscious, I was present. I was letting in the helpful information and keeping out any negative stuff. And the truth is, there wasn't really a lot of negative stuff at all. I had made it worse in my mind than it really was. But within a few minutes, we were on track. We went through it, and it was just so interesting. Once I was able to have a healthy sense of self, everything else it was just easy. And I'll have some more work to do. But I didn't have to feel ashamed. I didn't have to feel like I didn't do it right. I didn't have to feel like I wasn't good enough. I didn't have to feel like I upset him or he was unhappy with me. And that's all because now I take responsibility, chapter 2, for my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. And when I know I'm going to have a challenging or difficult situation, I pre-plan for that. I do my advanced intention. I write something out, or at least go through it in my head, so I'm prepared. All right, so an emotional response to a perception of ourselves as powerless and or unlovable. Now, I'm going to talk more about unlovability later, but again, this is that little kid, the little 6-year-old who felt like he wasn't lovable, he wasn't good enough. He was told quite often, what's wrong with you? Why do I have to keep telling you the same thing? Don't you get it? There was a lot of negative messaging, again, from a very, very well-intentioned, otherwise loving people, adults in my life. But those messages came in, and kids are literal. I said this before, children are literal. We take everything, and when we're kids, we take it at face value, and it becomes part of who we think we are. And so our job now is to begin to undo all that negative messaging, which is why I spent so much time on the first 2 chapters talking about affirmations, vision statements, all the things that we can do to reprogram that, to undo the doo-doo that was done by very loving, well-intentioned people who had no idea what they were doing in that regard. All right, so I'm going to talk about more about unlovable probably next week. But so this is the basis of my definition: an emotional response to a perception of ourselves as powerless and or unlovable in a given situation. And now I want to talk about the difference between fear and caution. All right? Everything I say here doesn't mean, when I say be bigger than you think you are, when I say change how you see yourself, all of that stuff, none of it means that we throw common sense out the window. None of it means that we put ourselves in harm's way. None of it means that we stop loving ourselves to love another person. Talk more about that later. But so what I want to address here is the difference between fear and caution. All right? We want to be cautious. We want to have a reasonable, rational response to the vicissitudes of life. Because there is stuff that happens that's unexpected, stuff that's outside of our control, stuff that can hurt us, that can have a negative impact on us. So we want to use caution. But fear, this emotional, this kind of irrational, at least it is for me, and I see it in other people. I don't think this is just about me. But this kind of irrational, unreasonable, overreacting to situations, to people, again, usually based on a misperception of ourselves, usually kind of a habitual response based on what may have happened to us earlier in our lives, whatever it is. Fear has the potential to be this irrational, unreasonable, out of proportion. I guess that's the best word. It can often be out of proportion. There's somebody in my life, I love this person very much, and they completely cannot handle insects, bugs in the house. And so they freak out, and it's just this, and it's startling. And it's like, what happened? And it's like, there's a bug. And it's like, now in their mind, that is a rational response. In my mind, it's so over the top. But so we want to take precautions, but we want to, and if any of you guys are afraid of bugs, I apologize. I'm just trying to make a point without making anybody wrong. So and here's the thing, and this is why this is so important. When we make a decision, when we make a choice based on fear, chances are we're going to make the situation worse rather than better. When we let those emotional, those overreactions run our lives, when we become defensive, we're going to talk a lot about defensiveness. And fear is behind anger and hatred. So when we respond with anger, we're really responding out of fear. I'm going to talk all about that in chapter 6. But the point is, when we're reacting from that place of fear, we're irrational and we tend to make things worse. So my suggestion is to approach your life, for me to approach my life from a place of caution as opposed to fear. And we'll make better choices, and we'll have better interactions with other people, and our lives will unfold in a different way. All right? So we're already over time. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take the break. When we come back, this was actually, if you guys got the assignment for tonight, I want to hear from you guys. You could say whatever you want about fear in general, or, talk about the difference between fear and caution. And, again, caution is, you look both ways when you cross the street. Fear is you don't cross the street, or you run across the street, or whatever, So again, it's not that we don't take care of ourselves. It's not that we don't use common sense, but we try to come from, and we talked about this extensively, we try to respond rather than react to whatever situation we're facing. All right, so think about this during the break. If you're new here, I'm going to play a song, or if you're watching at home, this song is Love My Life by Robbie Williams. You can get it on iTunes or Amazon Music. I have the lyrics on screen, and there's a particular reason I play this song over and over and over again. So look at the lyrics. There's some wonderful affirmations. if you are watching this at home after the fact, I'm not allowed to play the song because of copyright on YouTube. So if you want to hear it, you got to attend a live workshop. So I'm going to play the song, and then we'll come back in 5 minutes. All right, so let's open it up for people who want to share on the difference between fear and caution, or just if you want to talk about fear in general, your definition of fear, your take on the whole topic, or anything else that's pertinent, actually. So who would like to start us off here?
Good day.
Who wants to
Cynthia.
overcome? Who wants to overcome their
Fear.
fear? Okay. Cynthia.
Oh, Peter, I love hearing you share. I love hearing your book. I keep, telling a few more people about this. I said it to another lawyer who I talked with earlier today. So there is so much fear that I have lived with in my life. I went into new schools regularly, and instead of just being cautious about making new friends too quickly and not knowing who they were or what they were, choosing all the bad kids right away, instead of doing that, I would smile, and I was fear-filled. I mean, just filled with fear. And we moved, I think, 21 times by the time I was 18 years old. So I had lots of experiences with it. But it never got easier. I got more skilled at coping with it, but it was never easier inside. And that's one of those things that you are really making an impact on me in terms of altering that fear and into, taking appropriate actions, being cautious about a contract, an agreement, being responsible for doing my part to bring that forward to a group. Actions that I can actually do. I mean, they're not outside the realm of my ability to do them. I need to be fearless in doing those actions, which I can do. And I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate you as well. Thank you for saying that. And I'm going to say what I always say, you're doing the work. You're showing up, you're applying it in your life. I'm glad it's helpful, and you're doing it. And so just if you can elaborate a little bit, so in terms of a perception of ourselves as powerless and or unlovable, what I related to, what I heard maybe, and if you want to say more about it, it's a natural thing, when we're little kids, there is this question, am I lovable? Am I okay? Are people going to like me? Am I going to fit in? That kind of thing. And if I have a perception of myself, if I wasn't esteemed, I hate to use the word properly, but if I didn't bring, as a child, if I didn't receive a certain level of esteeming from outside of me, it's hard for us to generate that within ourselves, to feel good enough when we walk into a group of strangers, So do you want to say anything about that, or?
Yeah, I have done, years of therapy on these issues. And so I understand that one of my very earliest memories was hiding when the cars had big parts at the front that I could hide as a small child underneath, in the front of the car. And we had gone to go get my baby sister when I was 3.5 years old. So this is a belief system that I made up when I was 3.5 years old and carried with me until I was 50 something. And still to this day at 73, some of it still lingers, that I was not enough. That's why they had another baby. That's why they had another baby, those parents of mine. And they didn't explain to me in ways that I could understand until I was in my 50s. My mother said, well, of course we loved you so much that's why we had another baby. We had enough love for another baby. It wasn't taking anything from you that you weren't enough. But I had never heard her say those things. And I, as an adult, didn't think those things. I carried that little 3.5-year-old's ideas right into my world. I'm not enough, and that's that. So
And you had proof. You had actual proof of that.
Yes, absolutely. I understood that as a 3.5-year-old. Now, all these years later, I blush. I think 3.5. She governed my life. She governed my life, and I was that 3.5-year-old that didn't understand the ways of the world. And it's not that I had bad parents. They were loving parents, but they grew up in homes that were, different. They were each of them had parents that were of a different generation. My mother's parents were 19 when they had her. My father's parents were close to 40 when they had him. I mean, real jigsaw pieces. And things that they just didn't think to tell out loud or say out loud. I was born in 46, so they didn't talk about these things in 46 or 50 or later.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
That's why
So
that was one of the points I tried to make when we were talking about in chapter 1. I, like most people, I came to a conclusion about myself as a 6-year-old. And I never questioned that. I thought that's just the way I am. That's just the truth. And then a lot of that stuff is so painful that we bury it in our subconscious, and it runs our lives, and we're not even aware that that's what's running our lives. And then we wonder why things don't work out, why we have problems in our relationships, why we have problems with work, self-esteem. It's like, so my whole spiel, that's why we spent so much time in the first 3 chapters, is being conscious, being aware of who do I think I am in this situation? How do I see myself? And is that serving me? And is it true? Is it true that I'm not lovable? Is it true that I'm not good enough? Is it true I don't have what it takes? Now, eventually, the healing part comes with, first you start with the awareness, the recognition, and eventually, for me at least, it was a lot of forgiveness, to forgive what had been done to me by people who didn't know any better, and also to forgive myself for what I had done to myself as a result of seeing myself that way. I was my own worst enemy, and I was very, very unkind to myself. And my justification was, well, they did it to me. So, I had this whole story about blaming other people and all of that. So that's why the last chapter, which I feel is the most important chapter, is forgiveness. But for me at least, I have to do all the other work to get there, to actually be ready to forgive. So Cynthia, I love what you had to say. I think it's spot on, and I just honor you. I honor your courage. I honor your honesty. And thank you for sharing that. It's great.
Thank you.
Who else? Anybody else? Talk about fear versus caution.
Oh, I have something to ask. I have a question.
Go ahead, Didi.
Hey, thanks, Peter. Upon reflection, so this is really an important topic for me, and I won't kind of go into it at length, but my question is, we don't want to accept unacceptable behavior. So and we also want to be cautious. We want to be prudent and realistic. So how did you, at what point did you notice you went from, unrealistic fear, false evidence appearing real, to just being able to see and know when behavior was unacceptable, and then make healthy and responsible, loving decisions around that. Thanks.
Well, it's a great question, Dee Dee. And all I can say is it's been a process. You know, it's an ongoing. I mean, you know, as early as this afternoon, I had another opportunity to look at all of that. I think, you know, the biggest thing for me in terms of just reducing my fear response has been to learn how to take care of myself in my relationships with other people. And that's why in chapter, I think it's 6 or 7, I spend a whole thing on boundaries, because healthy boundaries are the primary way that we take care of ourselves in our relationships with other people. And if I don't know how to set healthy boundaries, then, and if I continue to see myself as a little kid, you know, that's the other thing, is to begin to remind myself sometimes on a moment by moment basis that I'm not that little kid anymore. See, all the stuff that happened to us and all the feelings we had as a result of that, I'm not invalidating any of that. You know, the fear that we felt, the pain that we experienced, I'm not trying to say that wasn't real, we shouldn't have felt that way. None of that. That was very real, especially for a 6-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 3.5-year-old or whatever age it was. I have nieces and nephews, and there are some, you know, I've seen them go through those ages, and that fear is very real. And it's born out of a place of, you know, children are inherently powerless, or they're at least inherently dependent. And the people that we're depending on, again, they're all, you know, in my experience, they're all very well intentioned, they're all loving, you know, doing the best that they can, and it can still create problems. It can still create issues. You can't, you know, we can't give what we don't have to give. And for a lot of people, and I'm in no way judging anybody in terms of parenting and all that, but for many of us, you know, healthy parenting is like speaking Chinese if we're not Chinese. I mean, it's a lot of us didn't get that. Not to make anybody wrong, you know, and I also see, you know, of examples in my own life of parents who are so loving and so concerned, and they go to the, you know, they sacrifice and they do everything they can for their children. So it's none of that. And what I realized was that for me, at one point I got that, you know, it was all a big mistake. You know, I had this whole idea in my head that I wasn't loved as a child. And it was only because I didn't receive the love in a way that I thought I needed to receive it to make it real. You know, I was never told I love you, kind of what Cynthia was saying. I was never told you're valuable. I was never told you're good. But the love was expressed in a different way. And one day it was like I woke up and I was like, oh my God, they really did love me, but they just had a different way of showing it. You know, because I had this whole story in my head about how they didn't love me. So, you know, and a lot of, you know, for me, codependence recovery was very helpful with all of this, you know, really beginning to look at my issues through the lens of codependency. Pia Melody, who writes a lot about codependency, she says, codependence is the disease of immaturity. And I could see that, you know, my problem was most days I was still living life as if I was a powerless, dependent, frightened little kid, 5-year-old or whatever, you know? And so undoing that began to open doors for me. And then, you know, a lot of it is, you know, being present in the moment. Today on that phone call, I was right there, you know, and I was monitoring my thoughts, I was monitoring my feelings, I was monitoring my words and actions. That's taking responsibility. And as I said in the last chapter, when we take responsibility, we get our power back. And the other thing is I don't give my power away so much anymore. I don't let what I think other people think of me be more important than what I think of myself. So it's a combination of all of that. Look, I would be lying if I said to you I never experienced fear. But more and more I'm aware in the moment, and I can begin to navigate those situations better. You know, and you know, you know, again, I mean, a year ago or 6 months ago, we could have said, you know, the world is really a safe place. I mean, now it's, you know, we see maybe it's not so safe in some ways. but it's still not the situation that's the problem. I give an example later in this chapter, I think it's in this chapter, of the difference between somebody like me. So the example I use, it's totally made up, but I think it illustrates the point. It's never the situation that's the problem. It's always how I see myself in that situation. And the example I use is you walk out of your house one morning and the building across the street is on fire. And you know there's people in there. And you also know, that if you run into that building to try to save those people, it may not turn out well for you or for them. And at that moment, and so you call 911 or whatever, and now you're waiting and you're kind of frozen. I'm frozen in place. And at that moment, the fire truck arrives and the fire personnel, they get off the truck, they throw on their protective gear and they run right into the middle of that building. They run right into the middle of that burning building. And I say in the example, the only difference is in that moment how they see themselves versus how I see myself. That's the difference in the response in that situation. I'm paralyzed with fear, and it's not to say that they're not cautious, it's not to say that they don't have some trepidation, but they run into the middle of that building. Now, I do acknowledge that they have thousands of dollars worth of protective equipment and they have years of training. But I also say that for most of us, in most situations in our lives, we will not need thousands of dollars worth of protective equipment and years of training to navigate those situations. For me, it's when, the boss walks into my office, when the senior partner, and I react as if they're a woolly mammoth, that's all in here. I don't need years of training. I need some awareness and I need to learn to do things differently. But my point is, as I change how I see myself, the fear that I feel goes down. It's not to say I'm not cautious. It's not to say I'm not aware. So that's the key. And that's why I keep harping on it. And that's why the title of this book at one point was, Who Do You Think You Are? Now it's the title of the first chapter instead. But as I change how I see myself, my whole experience of life changes. And the world has not changed. That senior partner is still the same person. The client I spoke with on the phone today, he's still the exact same guy he was when I first met him 2 years ago. But I have a different, or however long ago it was, I have a different experience because I've changed myself. I've changed who I think I am, how I see myself in that situation. Dee Dee, is that helpful? You want to say anything about all that?
It is. It sure is. I just wish I could fast forward through all the chapters, but since I can't, I'll just keep coming back. And thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. A few more minutes. Anybody else want to chime in?
Peter, it's Michelle. I think the fear that's holding me back is failure. And the negativity of listening in my head of what other people might think negatively of me getting started with my photography.
Great. All right, so let's unravel that a little bit. So fear of failure. I don't know anybody, I have yet to meet anybody who doesn't have some of that. All right, and it's not really, so let's break it down a little bit. So first of all, I talk about this, I think it's in this chapter, in chapter 4, I talk about, we get to decide what's a failure. We get to define that. And the example I give in the book is, and I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago, Thomas Edison. It took him 10,000 tries to invent the light bulb. Now, if he characterized every one of those 9,999 things as a failure, you know what? I wouldn't want to do much more. I would probably have quit after 999, much less 9,999. So he had some way to reframe that. And that's what I'm going to suggest to you, Michelle, and to me and to everybody else. We get to decide what a situation means. So instead of failure, it can be learning opportunity. It can be one step closer to my goal. It could be wow, I just learned something. And when Thomas Edison was interviewed, he said, I have not failed. I've just learned 10,000 ways that don't work. And if you listen to any interview with a successful person, they will tell you time after time, they will say, my greatest failure was my greatest lesson, my greatest teacher. It moved my life, my business in a whole new direction. But that only happens if we don't beat the crap out of ourselves. And this is where I'm going with the second part. If we don't beat the crap out of ourselves when things don't turn out the way we think they're supposed to. So this is where the self-love, self-forgiveness, being kind, going from being our own worst enemy to our own best friend comes in. So I really have no fear of failure if I do two things. And I think we talked about this, or if not, we're going to talk about it. There's no such thing as a bad choice or wrong decision if I do two things. Number one is I learn from my mistakes, which is what we just said. But number two is if I forgive myself for them. Because it's actually the fear that I feel, it's the fear of self-recrimination. Now, Michelle mentioned, well, what other people are going to think of me, or what I think other people are going to think of me. I got news for you right now. It does not matter what other people think of me. The only person whose opinion of me matters is my own. And the problem is I think so poorly of myself that I project that out onto the world, and I project that out onto other people, and then I become afraid of what I think they think about me. But I'm really afraid of my own self-recrimination, my own self-hatred, my own lack of self-love for my mistakes and my shortcomings. Once I start to love myself enough, forgive myself enough, then I'll tell you right now, I don't give a shit about what other people think about me and my photography anymore. And for years, I was paralyzed. I could not show my work to anybody because I was so afraid that they were not going to like it, and I was going to feel bad as a result. I was going to feel ashamed. I was going to feel not good enough. It was just going to be more proof that I was a loser. And that was all my own feelings about myself that I was projecting out onto the world. And it created real fear. But here's the thing, false evidence appearing real. The conclusion of chapter 4 is that fear is not real. The feelings may have some validity. I don't want to diminish or discount somebody's feelings, but the basis of those feelings is not real. So the fear of rejection, the fear of criticism, once I stop doing that to myself and projecting it out onto other people, I have no fear of showing my photos to anybody, any place, and any time. And my life reflects that. That's why I've won 73 awards for my photography. That's why my photos have been published in newspapers and magazines around the world. It's because I stopped caring, because I started caring about myself by being nicer to myself. And I stopped caring about what I thought everybody else thought about me.
Thank you.
Great question, Michelle. And I'll tell you right now, you're doing great. I keep saying this, but I can see it. You know, you're doing great. Just hang in there. And we talked about this in chapter 3. Don't give your power away to other people, because what they think of me, this is somewhere in the book, what other people, and I didn't make this up, I wish I had, what other people think of me is none of my business. And then I had to say, my opinion of myself is so bad that what I think of me is none of my business. I just got to get on with my life. Somebody want to chime in on
I'll
that?
remember that. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you, Michelle. Linda, you want to go?
Yeah, I did my homework for the
What do you
first
got?
time. Fear, I wrote down, is for me an unhealthy obsession with the what if, and caution is a calm and reasonable assessment of what could be. I have a lot of fears, like everybody else, but they're mostly irrational, and they paralyze me from thinking clearly and achieving. So that's the crux of that. That's my comparison.
Perfect.
Um,
Yeah, that's it. Tell me for you, Linda, how you overcome that. Because when you launched your book, for instance, how did you overcome? Did you have fear about that, and how did you overcome that?
well, I had a lot of time and a lot of great coaching along with getting my book out there. And even though I didn't know as much as I know now about publishing, I knew good from bad. And just being a journalist and being critical, and also being realistic in, you know, what's good, and seeking out expert advice, and paying for that. I felt more confident because I had, a lot of editing, a lot of critique, as well as my own confidence of, what I felt was, was valid. My book is on menopause, for the ladies, in case you don't know. And I have reviews on Amazon. There are great reviews, and there are awful reviews. And the awful reviews, you're really not even supposed to read. But when of course you can't help yourself. I read it and I just laugh, because obviously the person didn't read the book, or is just, there's one, I'll tell you, one review said that the author is obviously getting rich on all of the people that I promote in the book, because I have a lot of links in the ebook, and I make references to a lot of the contributors that are, women who invented products that help with menopause, or doctors that offered contributions, and I link their books. And the truth is, I've never received anything, any freebie from sleepwear to essential oils to skincare to nutrition. Nothing. I've received nothing. So, that can be very scary when you see your book being blasted, and you may, anybody who's written, you may, go to the photo forum, and someone is just going to say, oh, this is awful. Or not, they don't really say it that way, though, at the photo forum. But they think it. Or you think they think it if they're saying nothing about your work. And it can be crippling, but you know what? I'm at the point where, in my life, where I don't care. I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care. If I like it, and if it's something I'm proud of and I believe is a good product, then I'm satisfied. So
That's great. That's where we want to get to. That's
yeah.
what other people think of me is none of my business.
Mm-hmm.
Not giving our power away, taking care of ourselves, and I think what you said initially was, recognizing when fear is irrational in some way versus, okay, I need to make some adjustments here. There's something I can do to take care of myself, or to whatever, as opposed to the freaking out that we can do, the irrational that blocks our ability to make healthy choices and decisions, and then it is
But
a
that
lot of it.
came with years of experience of telling myself that, these bizarre things that, I told myself when I was younger,
Yeah.
and I believed, and just, being a complete germaphobe, and things I can't see, obsessing, it's just practice, recentering, meditation, affirmations, and stuff that you're teaching.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I suggest that what we're really doing with all of that is we're changing how we see ourselves in that situation, which removes some of the sense of threat, And again, it's not to diminish, anybody who has phobias or fears or whatever. It's not in any way to say that's bad or that's wrong. it's just another way to come at it, to begin to undo it, to see ourselves differently, and then ultimately see the situation differently. Thank you, Linda. You want to say anything else? We're going to wrap it up in a minute. Or did we lose you?
Thank you for.
You're welcome. Anybody else want to chime in on the topic of fear versus caution, or fear in general? All right. So we're going to play the song one more time. This time I'll make sure the volume is on, and then we'll come back and say our final goodbyes. All right, so I just want to say real quick, so this whole thing about fear, and it's the fear, for me, a big part of it has been the fear of self-recrimination. So the more I love myself, the nicer I am to myself, the less that I'm afraid that other people are not going to like me. You know, the more I am nice to myself, the less I demand other people be nice to me. It's just been so interesting to notice that I give my power away less the more I give give to myself what I think I need or want. So this has been huge with the photography thing for me, because I was so self-conscious, I was so afraid. And now it's like I have a whole different relationship with showing my work, with selling my work, and all of that. And so again, this is my truth, if it resonates with you guys, but it is that fear of self-recrimination and the fear of shame. But I only feel ashamed if I think other people's opinion of me is more important than my own opinion of myself. We're going to talk more about this as we go forward. All right, this is it comes up in this chapter and the next chapter. But I just wanted to leave on that note, and we'll stop here for tonight. Anybody want to say anything before we go?
Yeah, Peter, I'm a little late in coming in, but all of a sudden listening to everybody and understanding what I've been going through, I've been very fearful, or I guess that's the right word to say today, with this job. And I used to say, I hate making a mistake. So I never used to make mistakes because I was always very conscious of it. And I've realized, again, I'm going to say because I'm older, but the fear has made me make mistakes. And I just recognize that tonight. If I have to get rid of that fear, because I've seen a few mistakes along the way recently, and I'm going, I don't make mistakes. I don't make mistakes, but I've been very fearful. And there you go. And so I have to first work on the fear, but yeah, and the mistakes will start going away again, because I never used to make mistakes. Where is this coming from? Sorry, I'm a little late.
No, that's great. That's perfect. I love that you said that. This is what kind of the point I was making earlier. We can't do our best if we're in fear.
No, we can't.
For ourselves and for our families, for our clients, our employees. We can't.
And think of the whole circle then, because then you say, if you make a mistake, then you think less of yourself. And, oh my goodness, it's such a vicious, it's such a circle. So I'm going to work on that this week for sure.
But here's the thing. We're in charge of all of that. We get to decide this is what I was saying earlier. We get to decide what everything means. Is it really a mistake, or is it just a learning opportunity? Okay. And we get to decide how we feel about ourselves as a result of that. And I'm telling you, if your experience is anything like mine, the more I change how I see myself in that situation, the less fear I feel. Okay. And the less fear I feel, the better job I do for myself and others.
I really have to remember that. That really's got to sink in. Or I didn't realize it or recognize it in the last, few weeks of the job. So I'm glad that I got that out of the way.
Yeah, and the other part of that equation is just forgiving myself for my mistakes.
Mm.
The more that I forgive myself for my mistakes, the less mistakes I make, because I'm not anxious about screwing things up, because I'm not going to beat myself up if I don't do it right or perfect or the way I think it's supposed to be done. Today was a perfect example with this client.
Yeah.
My old pattern would have been, oh, he's unhappy with me. It's my fault. I'm not good enough. I didn't do it the right way. I would have beat the crap out of myself. But I got to choose. I got to decide how I saw myself, how I saw him. And my work is actually quite good. This is really, really challenging stuff. And I thought to myself, he keeps coming back to me. And I know some of the other photographers he's gone to get his products photographed. And they're all really good photographers, but he keeps coming back to me. So I know I'm doing a good job.
Yes.
And I still have things to learn, and there's still, I see things a little differently than he sees things, but none of that makes me a bad person. So when I remember that, I don't have to be afraid when those phone calls come. I don't have to take all that on and say, oh my God, I'm a bad photographer, or I'm a bad person. I'm not good enough. I don't have what it takes, because he's not happy with it. Yeah, some people,
we need strength in this.
Strength? Yeah. I think it's awareness.
Okay. Awareness, strength, something. Well,
because eventually, eventually we say, gee, I'm tired of doing this to myself.
Yeah.
But as long as I think it's out there, as long as I think it's his fault, the guy on the phone today, as long as I'm convinced that he's making me feel the way I feel, guess what? I am powerless to change it. This is why I spent so much time in chapter 2 talking about taking responsibility. Until I own all my reactions, I can't change any of them. As long as I think he's the problem, guess what? My life is not, in those situations, my life is not going to change. Now, again,
Thank you, Peter.
got issues, we all got issues, so I can cut him some slack. But this is about having healthy boundaries. We're going to talk a lot about boundaries, and boundaries are not what most people think they are. I have a lot to say about that, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
All right, great. Thank you, Barb. Anybody else?
Dee Dee, just really quickly, I think we're all incredibly courageous to be here doing this work. Peter, you're so courageous to put this work together. I don't know what you were doing for 7 months when you were writing this book, but you were definitely channeling courage. And I'm just, anybody who can come here and look at their thoughts, their feelings, and choose their words and their actions, just huge courage. And I'm so proud to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dee Dee. So you guys, this is great because you guys inspire me. When we come back each week and I hear people who are applying some of this stuff in their life, I love that. I live for that, quite honestly. So, but I have to acknowledge you guys because, again, I think what Dee Dee just said is exactly right. It takes a lot of courage to look at ourselves. It's so much easier to look at them and say, when you have to change so I can feel better, or it's your fault that I feel this way. It takes a lot of courage to stop that and say, wait a second, I got to look at my part in this. And again, it's not to say that other people don't have a part in it. It's not to say that other people aren't, acting inappropriately or unlovingly. I'm not making excuses for anybody's bad behavior. And there's no freedom in that. There's no road to peace or serenity by looking at everybody else and saying, you have to change for me to feel better. I tried that for many, 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 many years. And maybe some of you guys have tried that too. It doesn't work. So yes, it takes courage. I say, so for me at least, courage and willingness are the same thing. You know, if you're in a 12-step program, you hear a lot of people talk about willingness. We have to have the willingness. And for me, that's just another word for courage. And one day I looked up the Latin derivation of the word courage, and it's heart. It's having a heart. And we all have that. We've just buried it under piles and piles of crap. So now we're digging it out. We're exposing our heart. And that can be scary, you know, unless I know that I can take care of myself. One of my favorite affirmations, I can take care of myself in all situations and with all people. Makes it a lot easier when I really believe that. And I know that if I screw it up, I'm not going to beat myself up as much, or maybe at all. I surprise myself sometimes, you know, it's like I screw something up and it's like, I'm kind of waiting for the hammer to fall and it doesn't come. I'm like, it's this weird schizophrenic thing. I know, but it's like, I notice I don't treat myself the way I used to. And so I don't have that fear of self-recrimination either as much. All right, guys, anybody else? All right, tell your friends, all are welcome. If you want to watch this video, it should be up by tomorrow night. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.